for joining us here this evening on the Park Board meeting for January 28th, 2019. And welcome to all those from home that are visiting us. To start off here, we have on the agenda this evening a discussion about our dog park site and discussion briefly about goals and policies relating to the park strategic plan. So before we get started here, let's talk a little bit about minutes. Did everybody have an opportunity to review minutes from last meeting in December? Anybody have any comments or corrections? If not, can I have a motion to approve minutes?
I move we approve minutes as presented.
Second. Everybody in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Thank you for that. Next, we have a distinguished guest with us this evening, but we're going to put her right at the end of public comments. So, those that you don't know, this is Mayor Polly joining us this evening. So, anybody like to make a comment or two? You're up.
Are you going to have two comment periods or just one?
Okay, this is what I'll do because we are having some presentation and I've kind of bent the rules before and I'll bend them again. Basically, you're welcome to make comments now or you're welcome to make comments after presentation, but not both.
I was going to make dog park comments. Should I wait after the presentation?
If you would like to hear the presentation first and if that influences your comments.
Sure, I just didn't see any other spot for it on the agenda, so I'm happy to wait.
So after, okay. Anybody want to make comments now or prefer after presentations? I guess we'll move forward. Okay. So I guess that means you're next.
I'm up.
We got right to you quick.
Thank you, Brad. First off, thank you for providing me the opportunity to come and talk with you tonight. I am Mayor Mary Lou Polly, and I'm making the rounds to different boards and commissions because I just think it would be nice to deliver a personal thank you face-to-face to you for all the hard work that you do. Many in the community don't realize that this is an unpaid volunteer group that decides to give up some of their private, personal, and family time at night to come in and talk through these issues. I appreciate that you do that. I also want to let you know that your service does not go unnoticed. As I move around town and look at parks and trails, I'm thinking about all the good work that you're doing here for our city and for our community. Some of the stuff from last year that were great successes for the board was the council adopting the new park strategic plan. It's a document I refer to frequently. It's a document that I bring to meetings. Thank you for all your hard work on that. Also, the work you do on new parks and open space acquisition, like the Bergsma property on Newport Way. I probably am going to be using that one for the next 10 years, but thank you, thank you, thank you. Very proud of our boards, our commissions, our council, and our community that we were able to do that, and Jeff, our director, and his team for all their hard work. I appreciated watching your work on the cross-discipline joint commissions during the moratorium last year. The moratorium was a pretty stressful time for the city. It was sort of taking a pause in the central Issaquah plan and looking at some of the developments that came and thinking, we can do better, and it's kind of a pressure cooker when you're working under a moratorium, so I appreciated that you joined in with planning policy and shared your ideas. And I also thought it was really cool that you did a driving tour last July. I saw that on one of the schedules or the agendas where you were out in the community looking at some of the projects and sites. That's a great idea. So in 2019, I'm pretty excited to stay tonight just to hear on the regular business the presentation and discussion on the city's first ever city-owned dog park. That's kind of fun. And also, it looks like on the work plan, and Jeff, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a new conversation going to happen on Green Necklace this year. We're moving from vision language down into details, and that body of work will come through the Parks Board. I also want to thank you for welcoming the public into your meetings. You guys, Brad, thank you for being flexible and allowing them opportunities to comment when they've also had a chance to hear the information that's presented as well. It helps the public be able to make meaningful comments because they have all the same information. And so thank you for doing that. This is a really thoughtful and professional group, and I just wanted to come in tonight and say thank you. We are hoping to do an event this year where we can invite all of our board and commission members together to say thanks and get you to meet each other, because it's just a good thing to do. So thank you very much for letting me come this evening. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you. So with that, I think we're on to you and Jen talking about dog park.
Sounds great. I will tee it up. Before I do, you might notice another new face in the room. Shantae is our new park planner. Started January 2nd, so we're quickly approaching a month, and very excited to have her on board. We successfully stole her from WashDOT, and brings her experience as a landscape architect, as an arborist, and a number of other skills. Worked on a wide variety of projects that we're really, really excited to have her here. So, Shantae, welcome to the team.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. Awesome. So with that, dog park. So as you know, we've been working through our site selection process, and really how this started last year was taking a look at our existing city parkland and how and where might we incorporate an off-leash dog park, city's first public off-leash dog park, into our city system and our city network. Through that public process, through a series of surveys we had online, as well as some public meetings, we really quickly began to get a lot of feedback from this community in terms of their interest and where they would like to see a dog park and not see a dog park, or other areas that they want us to consider and look at. As you recall, at our December 10th meeting, our last meeting, we shared with you the recent work. We put together I know Brad has a copy of it, an evaluation form that took a look at and created a matrix. If you recall the criteria that we really vetted all those properties against, populated those criteria with the survey feedback we heard from our community, as well as some of the initial site work that we received, and had communication with our development services team and other departments in the city. As we left that meeting on the 10th, as you recall, it became pretty clear through that evaluation and through the discussion from the park board that the site that would activate roughly 2 to 2.5 acres at Tibbetts Valley Park was really looked to be the preferred site, the site that gave us both size that this community was looking for, and looking for an off-leash dog park over 2 acres, and also readiness, opportunity that a site that had parking, that had restrooms, that had those support facilities available, that we could even consider something that could be built relatively quickly. From that meeting, we talked then about we would host some open houses on the site. We were able to have a couple of those here in January. We then had a chance to have some further conversation with Development Services Department, more specifically as to what the permitting process would look like for that site. Also looking at the history and background of that site that I'll go into a little bit. We're able to get a little further detail and understanding of what a permitting process would look for that site. I say this all as an introduction, and that tonight, as we come back to you, really the point in the conversation and the discussion here is we are at a point, and I think in some ways this might introduce a new process opportunity for us as we look at future capital projects, in that as we are transitioning from really what's been public engagement around site selection and site options, exploring multiple sites for a certain amenity, we're really transitioning to, this represents a transition from exploring multiple sites to, do we want to really focus on one site and focus on Tibbetts Valley Park as a site that we want to get into and do more site-specific details. So the conversation tonight and the context tonight is really to get your feedback, and if you want to consider a recommendation, really at that checkpoint. This is not a recommendation that we're asking for final decision on, are we or aren't we going to construct an off-leash dog park at Tibbetts Valley Park? Because honestly, where we are in the process, we're not at that point. We are really still at a point of transitioning from, as I said earlier, exploring multiple options to looking at this site. And as we now start to look at this site, it really sets into motion further work that we have ahead of us, further work in terms of site analysis, understanding possible critical areas on the site, looking at design. There will be, like any of our processes, a permitting process that we would go through. The timeline that we have included for you in your packet tries to identify what we see as a projected timeline for that work. As we've talked with development services, as we've looked at what our next steps are, you'll see the point in time we're at on the 28th, and really that transition, that gate, if you will, that we're going from looking at multiple sites to, boy, if we want to consider identifying and looking at this as a single site, what we see in these next couple of months in February and March is a number of things we would do for site evaluation. A prior master plan that was done a number of years ago did identify an unclassified, which at the time was identified as an unclassified wetland in this 2.5 acre area. As unclassified at that time, what that meant as an unclassified wetland, and the report would show it was an unregulated wetland. We want to better understand that. So we'll be having a wetlands biologist go out and take a look at the site, see if there actually is a wetland there. If it is, what is its classification, if it has one to now. So that type of site evaluation work is what we would get into in February and March. We'd begin diving into more detailed conceptual design and begin to initiate the permitting process with development services. We would very much anticipate and want a public engagement process as we go into design. We really enjoyed the open house events we had on site. Probably a total of nearly 24 residents came and took advantage of that and shared with us their thoughts, and I think really at a front end level began to get an understanding as residents got to see and feel and touch the site to get a sense of what design opportunities are there, or what that dog park would actually look like. That more focused site evaluation work and site assessment work will also obviously inform design. From there, we would set a goal for finalizing that design April through June, again with some public engagement as we're going on. That would allow us, as we're looking at being able to wrap up permitting or consider finalizing permitting through the summer, July and August, with a projected or a goal of a timeline to look at construction this fall. But again, I want to give some context before I have Jen and Shante share any further info they have from the meetings or other work. Tonight is not a a one-touch park board recommendation. What I'm hoping that as we are looking at the high level of public engagement we have through a process, this is, again, think of this as a checkpoint opportunity for you as an advisory group to give voice as we then go in to do this further site work that really needs to be done to determine, are we really going to build a dog park at Tibbetts Valley Park? We then, later this summer, towards the end of summer, would anticipate, as we have all that information, coming back to you, and again, as an advisory group, having that opportunity to give another recommendation, whether you think proceeding with this and the design that's been laid out as we go through this public engagement, if that makes sense. So just some context for tonight as we open this up for discussion. I think what we've seen, what we've learned of this site so far, we do not see any major fatal flaws for this site for being an off-leash dog park. There are still question marks, but there would be question marks for any site and any type of development we would have, given the point at which we're in for this project. So, Jen, if you want to share anything further.
Just to piggyback on that, when we look at some of the projects we've recently done, as we move from here's the site that we're doing into the development stage, Central Park Pad 1, right? Prime example, we had a wetland that had restrictions we had to work around. There were water lines underground we had to work around. And so as we merge into this next stage of site development, that's where we'll start really teasing out some of those on-site, site-specific questions. But like Jeff said, there's no fatal flaws with this site through our research with development services at this time. So as we look back through where we've been through our journey and the exploration of several sites, this really is proving to be and one site that really meets that community need of the readiness factor, because we heard very loud and clear, both in public comment, online surveys, and during meetings, how soon can we get one built? And this is the one site that's readily available to us that we can more expeditiously explore. When asking for survey responses, size of the dog park was really, people didn't seem to care if it was a super big one or a moderate one. And this one really fits all the different parameters, wooded and a little bit open, sloped and a little bit flat, really fit all of the little pieces as we go back through the review of the other sites. So one thing I innately, as we started doing all the walk and talks this last week, as people were coming up, they would ask questions. Well, how's it getting developed? And it's like, well, we're not there yet. But, everyone offered up ideas, provided a written comment, some ideas as to where a fence should be or where a gate should be or where a water faucet should be. So people are naturally, as they were walking the site, starting to think that next step, which is how do we further start designing this, and reassure that as we start designing this, we learn more through our exploration of the site. We will come back with some design concepts, send them out for public comment and review, and park board as well. So we will have further touches as to where that gate's going to be, or where a path might be. But we will take a look at the trees on site, remove any hazardous trees, keep as many trees as we can, deal with the grading as we can, and really make this park what people want it to be. So the people who showed up on site for the walkthroughs, I think were actually rather surprised once the blackberries got mowed down. Thank you, staff, for taking some time out of their day to mow the site so it was walkable. And if you've not had an opportunity, I would offer you put on some hiking boots. Linda came out and Brad was out, and some of the audience was also out too, exploring the site. And really what looks like a 2-acre site on paper, when you're out there, actually has a much different feel to it. There's a lot of opportunities, some beautiful views, nice orientation with the rest of the park. You feel like you're in a wooded area, but you're still centrally located within the park and the city. So with that, the comments received were very positive. There are some innate minor concerns, like Jeff mentioned, but those are further things we would explore during site exploration and development, but there's nothing flawed that would keep us from developing the site.
Yeah, if I could just add, I think some of what we heard really in those walking tours, some really good feedback and some common themes. One is access and gates, and really looking at, I think we heard from a number of folks who came considering multiple entry points, looking at an entry from 12th. It would be a more direct entry from the neighborhood, from the Squawk neighborhood, and another gate near the parking lot. I think how to deal with that transition from the parking lot, wherever that gate would be, transitioning into the gate park or into the dog park, will be, again, a really strong, important design consideration, what that looks like. Small dog, shy dog, size, making sure that is an area that is functional. How do we learn from some of the experiences, the pros and cons, the good and bad experiences of other dog parks as we look at sizing some of those, if we want to consider that. Surfacing, and what surfacing and surface types we consider as we look at this is really, I think, a common theme that we heard as well. One last point of interest I think is important, and then certainly open up for questions, discussion, is there was a master plan that was done in, and I should have the date at the top of my head, but I don't, 98, that was completed for Tibbetts Valley Park. That master plan did call for activation of this corner of Tibbetts that really has never been activated. In that master plan, the activation of that called for some trails and tennis courts, is really what that activation looked like. As we consider this, and as we consider what we've heard 20 years moving forward and what this community is looking for, and the diverse interests it's looking for in its parks, activating this, staying true to activating this corner, but activating it for an off-leash dog purpose is, I think, in many ways consistent with that master plan goal of seeing this used and being a space that's used for community. How that modification is addressed through the permitting process is something we'll work very closely with development services on as we go through that permit process. I think it's also important as you're discussing and as we're thinking as we move forward. There's also on our work plan a master plan or revisioning we want to do for Tibbetts Valley Park, right? As we do some future thinking and realize that that neighborhood and really the neighborhood to the north of Tibbetts Valley Park will be changing in the next 15 or 20 years, as that's really a core area within the Central Issaquah plan. That is where density is planned on the valley floor. And so in that future thinking, in that visioning work for that park, that really is intended to focus on the floor of the park, the area of the park as it relates to SR 900 and the manor and that portion of the park. Certainly where this proposed dog park would go would be part of that conversation, but is certainly, I think, consistent with what we heard in the park strategic plan, and will be consistent with one of the primary goals of that revisioning is how do we activate this park in more diverse ways, and how do we activate it so it has more of a daytime drop-in, what I would call sort of unscheduled types of use and energy, whereas right now in its current programming it's very schedule dependent, meaning, boy, when there's baseball games that park is really used, but when it's not scheduled, that park really isn't activated. And so I think in a lot of ways, this concept of a dog park, as well as the skate park that has just been completed on the other side of the park, really represent that. Really, I think what the visioning work of Tibbetts Valley Park is going to be pointing towards, and that's just how do we bring more diversity into that park. So with that.
So the
Question,
comments from
discussions?
staff here, so, well, let's kick it around here. Any questions, comments that the board has?
Is there any initial review, initial thoughts about any potential wetland situation up on the upper area there? Where's that at right now? We know we have a wetland situation,
Like I said,
correct?
we don't know if we have a wetland situation.
You don't know that, okay.
So there was in the 98 master plan, there was what was labeled an unclassified wetland, a non-regulated wetland. So, as I said earlier, we will have a wetland biologist going out onto the site, as we do as we transition to any site-specific work. So in February, March, we'll have a wetland biologist go out and take a look and really identify what is going on there. Is it a wetland, and if so, what is it classified at, and what does that mean?
Okay. So it will be significantly addressed?
Yes.
Because that
Yep.
wetlands can really throw a wrench into a project, as you know.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
I think we need to move ahead on this dog park because I don't like the fact that now a lot of the people are using the ball fields and the playgrounds as dog toilets and running their dogs unleashed or leashed in areas where children are playing or kids are playing, and I don't think that's a good idea. It's gotten a lot looser than it used to be, but I still see it over at Tibbetts all the time, inside the fenced-in areas, people are running their dogs. So, I don't like that. It would really be nice to have a place that we could send them to rather than just say, get out.
Identified area.
And that's probably not the only site that we need to make a dog park too within the city, so.
Yeah, I'd like to know what's gonna be done to keep the dogs off Tibbetts ball fields. You know, I think the only restroom over there is down there by the ball field. Is there plans on putting another restroom up top, or everybody that has a dog is gonna walk their dog down through the ball fields to the restrooms?
So the restrooms would be accessed through the parking lot. You wouldn't have to go through the fields to get to the restrooms.
They're gonna stay on the cement all the way down to that, not go down the grassy knoll?
Yeah, dogs are certainly welcome within our parks on leash. The expectation would be when you're not in the off-leash area. And there are ways that you can sign. There's ways that you create the gates. What most successful dog parks have is a double gate system, right, where you have an area where you're signing, encouraging, reminding those dog owners to put their dog back on the leash as they're heading back out into the park. So there's a lot that can be done to create that expectation and manage that.
Similar to the signs in Memorial Field by the kids' play area where it says dogs can't be in there? Like those type of signs?
Like the type of signs.
To keep out of the kids' play area?
Sure, I'm not sure what specific sign you're thinking of, but yeah.
Are you saying it's okay in the city right now currently for dogs to go in where the kids' swings and everything are?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's okay for dogs to be on leash within our parks. Sounds like that's maybe another matter we can talk about.
Well, it's
separate
I
from-
see now, because we've been making this attention to Tibbetts, is the more I go by there, the more I pay attention, and probably in the past 2 or 3 weeks, I've seen 3 or 4 people running their dogs in the baseball fields, unleashed, running around. And I'm just saying that's not healthy and safe to have those dogs running around using it as their toilet and have our children out there playing in the fields.
Totally agree. And dogs off leash are not welcome or not encouraged or allowed within our parks. Dogs on leash are welcome within our parks.
I'm just trying to clarify that. That's all.
I just wasn't aware that we allow dogs in, like the little bark area where the kids are running around, falling all over the ground and stuff. I thought that was, I don't know. You're saying it's not anymore?
I would have to look. I don't have the specific city code memorized, Jeremy, so I'd have to take a look at that.
Speaking of the bathroom, and Jen and I talked a little bit about this, could activating that on a year-round basis be something involved in the site evaluation process?
Winterizing it. I say winterizing it, and that, yeah. Getting
But there
the
could also
pipes and the systems at a level that we could have it open year-round.
Right.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of key and one of the infrastructure items that helped us focus on Tibbetts in the first place. And if we're not going to have that open year-round, that kind of negates that.
I know some other dog parks also do portable restrooms for off-season. Some of them don't have plumbing, so we'll use those. But yes, we have talked about heating that restroom.
Kind of one of the other questions I have is, I'm assuming that a cost analysis can occur after the site evaluation is done. It's probably a little premature now because you don't really know what you're up against. But at some point before this comes back to us, will that be done after site evaluation?
At some point during the design process, yes, we will be able to come back. I think come up with a few concepts and take those out for some concept and some review and further comment to see what's really working as far as pathways or access points. And then once we have a final, we'll be able to really start narrowing that down.
So in terms of cost estimating, is what you're saying too, budgeting, cost estimating?
Well, right, to
the
give
work,
us some
yes.
idea in terms of what can be created within the $200,000 that's been already afforded to this. And, I really see, when I look at that, I really see amenities are going to be similar to whatever place we pick. But in terms of actual site development, that's going to really vary depending upon which one is selected. I think Tibbetts was selected to some extent because it already has some infrastructure, which is huge cost for some of these other sites that doesn't really belong at Tibbetts. So it's really going to be grading and a lot of those things, trail building, what have you, that are going to be the real costs.
Fencing will be
And fencing.
the biggest cost, yeah.
Again, fencing would be similar with any site as well. So it's really what are the unique costs associated to Tibbetts. I think that is something that would be nice for us to know about and to see whether this really is going to be a good feasible site or not.
Right.
Okay.
At this stage, it is just a little premature.
I mean, I don't think we're trying to say, which can be done the cheapest. I don't think that's the issue, because if it's the best site, then we'll find the money later to add more amenities or whatever. But we also don't want to be caught in a situation where some of the costs are so exorbitant that it kind of puts it out of the playing field. So.
Yeah, so like any project, we as we now go into design and permitting and get an idea of cost and are able to true up some costs and compare that to budget, that's where either through concepts, we might be something as we learn that, might need to consider phasing. But that will all be better informed as we make this transition to this more site-specific phase that would be in this work.
So just to clarify, I think what I understand is that we don't see any fatal flaws in the project, but it sounds like there are potentially some obstacles. One being the wetlands, another potentially being the master plan. Maybe, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know that that's a fatal flaw. That
Not
is
a fatal flaw, it's
that's
an
a
obstacle
process.
process. Are there other ones that, other obstacles you think that we will be maybe having to navigate as we're going through this process?
Water springs came up as a potential, and I assume that the wetlands expert would be able to address that.
Yeah, I think any critical areas analysis that we'll do will help us understand what we'll need to navigate and design around.
And then the other question I had was just, I love activating our parks more so for when they're not being used. But I have been in those parking lots when they are at capacity. And so I don't know what the process is for really understanding how that flow works. If it's already full with baseball players and soccer players, and then you're also adding in, dog users. So I don't know if that's part of your process in terms of looking at what the design is, but that's something that's kind of top of mind just for all that flow in that parking lot.
Yeah, parking and traffic will be an element of the permitting process we'll be going through. So analyzing that and looking at that, yep.
This isn't really as serious a comment as others have made, but the day that I walked up there, and I thought it's really kind of interesting. I think it would be a fun place for animals. There were several people out there with their dogs that day, and their dogs seemed to be really enjoying exploring the area, even though they were on a leash and they were tethered. What really impressed me the most was that all those people, their dogs had been socialized to some extent, because the dogs did not seem to be irritated with each other. They didn't seem to be, some be aggressive, some were shy and retiring. It seemed like the people that were there, their dogs have been socialized, and this would be a great opportunity for the dogs to get out and really interact with other four-legged critters. Obviously, you'll have some owners that don't have their dogs as socialized, but hopefully those people would realize that this isn't the place for their dogs and they would go somewhere else. But I was very impressed with the people that came out and how socialized and eager their dogs were to interact with other dogs.
They were getting really excited about a new dog park. They were in their best behavior.
But I mean, when they were up there kind of on the knoll or the hill, at the top of the hill, I think the dogs really kind of were, ooh, this is kind of neat, And some of the owners and I also had issues slopping through the mud, but the dogs didn't seem to mind the mud at all.
Any other comments, questions? If not, let's turn this over for a little public comment period. I'm assuming that most people that are going to want to make comments are going to be commenting on the dog park and not goals and policies. I may be wrong, but so let's go ahead and limit your comments. Thank you, Mayor Polly. Oh, you're just. Limit, please state your name, your relationship to the city, and try and keep your comments to within 5 minutes. We'll just do a free-for-all. Whoever wants to jump up and go ahead.
Sure, I'll go. My name is David Reamer. I live up on Squaw.
You could stand at the podium so
sure.
you can be on camera.
So efficient.
My name is David Reamer. I live up on Squaw Mountain. And I've been advocating for a dog park for about 1.5 years, ever since Mayor Polly knocked on my door back before the primary about 18 months ago. And I actually started a petition that about 200 plus people signed and presented that to the city council to try to get an amendment for some dog park funds, which again was championed by the mayor and some key council members, and really appreciate that. I've been to many of the meetings and heard a lot of discussion. I've been to some of your Parks Board's meetings. I even commented at one when it was over at the Tibbetts Manor. And I just wanted to say that after the feedback from the survey, after the site selection meetings, after the work the Parks Department has done, I really would love it if the Parks Board would recommend that we move forward with the Tibbetts Valley project. I know Jeff's kind of soft playing it, that, you know, we don't have to make a recommendation now and all that, but I'd love for us just to lock it in and let's get to work. The city's ready. The number one thing that my petitioners mentioned to me was timing. It's time for the city to have a dog park for our dogs. We have to go to Bellevue, we have to go to the Highlands, we have to go to Redmond, and this is an interesting alignment of the survey results as well as the park's conclusions matching up 100%. Tibbetts Valley Park was number one with a bullet on that survey that hundreds of people gave feedback on. And it really was the only site that made sense if we want a dog park within the next 12 months when you look at the matrix that the Parks Department developed. So I think the board has a great opportunity here to go along with what seems to be the site that's going to make the most sense. And I think that we should also be aggressive and shoot for the fences and start thinking 3, 4, 5 years ahead. When can we actually create now our dream dog park? I think this one is a dog park of necessity and of convenience. But I think that I'd love the board to work with the Parks Department and say, where can we develop our Marymore? Where can we develop our Luther Burbank? And really craft it. And if it takes 5 years, it takes 5 years, but it could be a destination that brings people to the town. Not only is great for our people, but people will come from around just to use this dog park if we could work together and find a site that's really interesting. I don't know if it's South Lake Washington, I don't know if it's Ingy Johnson, I don't know where that would be. Maybe it's a new piece of land we don't own yet, but I'd love for this to be phase 1 and for the city to really look forward and figure out an exciting phase 2 for the dog park idea, because it's just low-hanging fruit. I mean, I just can't tell you how many dog owners I talk to that are anticipating this first park and just can't wait to use it. And I went there for the open house and just really had my eyes open to talking with Jennifer and Shantae and looking at the potential of this site. So I really strongly hope you'll recommend it to the mayor and to the parks departments that we move forward on. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to make comment? Connie?
So, Connie Marsh, I live on Squawk. I have a giant schnauzer who loves dog parks, but he also really likes mud, and really likes mud. So he finds it up in the Highlands, because they have springs up in the Highlands. And this one is wet. And what concerns me about, I suppose, the process, I don't really understand. Yes, we want to narrow it down to this, but then, you know, if it doesn't work out, you can change it. People have told me that many years in the city, and if you have a meeting where you're voting to narrow it to an option, that shall be the option. You never go back and change it. And I feel herded, and I don't have a herding dog, into a one choice. And I guess I felt herded from the city's graphic, which I didn't agree with, and I feel herded in this. I see no problem with saying, you know what, this still looks like our most likely bet, but we really don't even know how much land we have, because we don't know if we have a critical area there. And unlike building a building on top of a wetland, what are you going to do with a spring or a wetland in a dog park? Pave it so that it doesn't seep anymore? What kind of drainage would you have to put in to get rid of that much water? So how much land are you really going to end up with in this situation for a usable dog park when you consider that? Because it's not like you can fill an insignificant wetland and it'll stay filled. It's just going to become a mud hole because it's a wetland, right? So I don't think it's the same. You got my emails. So all I'm saying is, yeah, okay, this seems to be the easiest one to get done, but don't solidify on this exact park until you see the critical area, and in advance of that, you get estimates of what it's going to cost to make it a functioning dog park. And I would ask for 2 other parks to have a back of the napkin set of estimates on cost also, so that you aren't just being pointed only at one option. And then, when you come back and you get more detailed information, then you have your vote on, you know what? That one's not gonna go, we have to look at something else, or yeah, that Tibbetts Park is the best park. Dog park lover, not a muddy dog park lover. And I see potential with that park, but you have to get your ducks in a row first. And then I have to talk about policies. When this went to Planning Policy Commission, when the strategic plan went through, I drew this big matrix that was trying to look at your new strategic plan and connect it with the policies that exist. And there was very little common ground there. So I'm hoping that the people who are going to be doing this work are going to be doing it in a public venue where people who are more used to creating policy and linking it to plans can also easily comment and hopefully make it a better product. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie.
Corey Christensen, Squack Mountain.
Same giant schnauzer.
I've been coming to park board meetings for the last 20 years, anytime there was a mention of a dog park. And I'd say that maybe 15 years ago or so, this Tibbetts Park area was sort of on the table, maybe even between 15 and 20 years ago. Back then, I sounded exactly like David. Exactly. I was exuberant about this, and I would have taken absolutely anything. But not now. So what's changed? Well, one thing that's changed is that the surrounding dog parks in Luther Burbank, Robbinswood, and Beaver Lake, those didn't exist then. Or if they did, they were new dog parks. Now they've been remodeled, most of them, and they all have been remodeled based on sort of lessons learned. And that lesson learned, I've learned a lot going to these dog parks. I'm a heavy dog park user. I probably go to dog parks in this area at least 100 times a year. And you talk to people, you see what's good, you see what's bad, you also see how dog parks have evolved. The problem with what we're looking at now is this dog park, which you guys are envisioning right now, would have been a low-end dog park 20 years ago. The reason being is that from the beginning, you have never laid out what the criteria is for a dog park. At the September park board meeting, Danielle, who I don't see here tonight, she asked for that, but we've never seen it. One of the problems with a dog park is you can call it a dog park, but really what it is, and I'm not quite directly quoting Al, but from the old days, it's pretty close. It's basically an open cesspool. And the problem is, you either have a successful dog park, then it's not an open cesspool, or a biological hazard, then it's a dog park. And the problem is the line between the two is very narrow. And if you look at what our surrounding neighbors have done to rehab their dog parks, it's all been basically based on that biology. One of the flaws so far in especially listening to the last park board meeting on television, which I appreciate that is on television now, is that staff was selling the slopes of this site as being a positive. Well, there aren't really any dog parks that are sloped like that, and that's because drainage and field surface are two of the most important things that you can have in a dog park, which, by the way, are not on your current priority list or criteria list. What you have are frivolous things like fake fire hydrants for dogs to do whatever on, which is frankly an insult to dog owners. We have not had a serious conversation about what a real dog park consists of. What it consists of is is drainage, field surface, and then there's also the quality of the experience. And part of the problem is shaded areas, steep slopes, they don't work so well. And then the water is a huge, huge problem. One thing that several people brought up on the park board last time was parking. I think parking is a significant issue because the time at Tibbetts that most people are going to use a dog park in the summer and the nice times of the year is when that parking lot is going to be full. So does that mean people won't use the parking lot? No, what they'll do is they'll park in the Innswood neighborhood, and then you'll get calls from the neighbors there. And then how are those people going to get to the dog park? Well, they'll jaywalk across 12th Avenue. So maybe what you'll have to do is ask for a flashing light. But will you get one? Probably not. So now all of a sudden you've created, if you don't have adequate parking, a potential hazard for people. So I think the problem here is we need to be looking at the criteria for a dog park. The other thing that floored me at the last meeting was that there's been no promise of what we're going to get in a dog park. In other words, I think we ought to get a dog park that drains, that we're not standing in muck, that doesn't make dogs sick, and that also is a positive experience. Those things should be a given. Now the $200,000 number, that's about how much Sammamish spent on the Beaver Lake Dog Park. And I have their site development plan right here. And this is the plan, not exactly what it ended up being. But for example, fencing was $26,000 of $212,000. $83,000, which they chose not to spend then, was on field surface. And right now they have a problem because, now this is a 10-year-old park, and I'm actually not being too critical of the Sammamish people because I think they made good decisions for their time. But they have a drainage problem, they have a field problem, and that this would have solved. And so in conclusion here, I think we need to have a dog park that on day one we walk into, and it should be like every other park. In other words, as nice as the skateboard park, as nice as the parks on the Highlands. It shouldn't be we're walking in, and as park users, you want to hand us a shovel, and we're supposed to construct, clean, maintain, and enforce dog rules and all that. No, we're going to a park to run our dogs and have some fun. And so I think that the bar needs to be considerably higher. We need to have some criteria that you guys are measuring up to, because right now it's, oh, well, if you might not get this, and it might be sometime off in the future. And if that's drainage, field surface, and things like that, then I'm in opposition to this, because you're not delivering a dog park, you're delivering a biohazard. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Any other comments?
Could I rebut a comment?
Sure.
Great. So again, I'm David Reamer. I live on Squaw. Corey, just to address you directly, I've also visited dog parks probably even more than you have the last couple of years. And so I've seen what works and what doesn't work. And I think you've got some valid concerns. But I also don't think that the Parks Department is looking just to fence this up, open up the gate and say, hey, I hope this works for everybody. I don't believe that's the way, for the people I've talked to, I don't believe that's the way they're approaching this. I think your parking point is well made, but I also believe there's another whole parking lot that every time I go to play tennis is completely empty over by the skate park. There's also, it's called Park and Ride. So it's not a problem for me when I go to Beaver Lake to walk a quarter mile to the dog park if I have to park far away. So if the baseball fields are full, I'll go park on the other side of the Tibbetts Valley and I'll walk my dog on a leash till I get to the gate and take him in. Or since I live on Squaw Mountain, I'll walk down to 12th and I'll use the top gate that we're hoping to put in. So I think some of the concerns we can definitely address. As far as your questions about slope and shade not working, I'd have to totally disagree. My dog loves the slope at the Bark Park, and tons of dogs chase and run up and down that hill. And the shady areas at Beaver Lake are incredibly popular, especially in the summertime, going through those trails. So when I was walking through and doing the open house, I felt like this site was an absolute home run from a standpoint of a lot of interesting ground for the dogs to cover, some shade for the hot days, some open areas for the cooler days. So again, I'm not just looking to try to get anything. I want something that's going to make sense. And I think that this site makes a ton of sense. And that's why I think it was number one on the survey as well. I think a lot of people have had the same thoughts. So I just wanted to throw those comments into the mix.
I want one quick.
Make it quick. I don't want to turn this into a debate.
No, I know. The point is, you need to have some measurables. I don't disagree with you, but we need to have some measurables. The other thing is we need to have other choices, and one other choice should be on the table is Pad 4 in the Highlands. If you looked at Pad 4, now I know that you want to have picnics there and so on. If you look at your existing design, it looks like a real dog park. It would not take much to make that into a dog park, and you should be looking at those two things right into parallel, because to address what Brad was talking about, it might be cheaper to actually make a real dog park, forever and ever dog park on Pad 4, versus throwing money at something that might be impossible to actually make into a feasible dog park. If you can make this into a feasible dog park, fine. But if you can't, then we need to be looking at other things.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, that'll wrap up our comment portion. So let's kick this around a little bit here further between our board. And as the way I see this, and Jeff, I think, put it very distinctly, that this is not a final say on this dog park. All this is a step to move forward, essentially, with a site evaluation so that we can have better information to know whether or not this is feasible or not. And that there will be a second hearing, to some extent, after more information is known, to know whether or not this is for sure the place or not. Personally, I don't see the necessity at this juncture, this is just my opinion, to run up a bunch of additional expense to do a site evaluation on a secondary or a third park at this point. If it turns out that this is not feasible, then we go to the second option, which is really Bernston. The third option really didn't do very well in the matrix. So I mean, we'd have to maybe go all the way back to seeing what other options there are. But so I don't know. My opinion is that to move forward at this point makes some sense to at least go to the site evaluation stage. And then we'll revisit it after we really know more information. I mean, if they discover there's things up there that just don't make this feasible, it makes it very simple. We don't do it. But if they can, if the experts, and we all have to rely upon the experts rather than our speculation at this point, if the experts say there are some issues but they can be overcome, then we can address that. So that's my 2 cents. Anybody else have any comments? Jeremy?
I just have a quick question. Does the city need to change the municipal code to be able to have an off-leash dog park?
Review that, but I don't believe so.
Municipal code 6.08.020 says that we can't have dogs off leash in any public place. So I don't know if that just has to be revised or.
I believe that's reiterative of county code, that county code states that dogs must be on leash at all times unless in an off-leash facility. So unless it's designated, but we'll research that.
6.08.020. I'll bring it up because a few of us spent quite a bit of time on the Timberlake dog park issue, and they sent us all these municipal codes and whatnot. And one is particular to Issaquah about on no public premise any off-leash dog park dogs.
Well, that's a great point. We'll look at
Maybe
that.
it should be revised, I don't know.
Yeah, as part of the animal services agreement too, there's city code, also references county code, but we'll take a look at that. And I know the history with Timberlake, that wasn't a dog park. That was a undesignated set of activity that was happening, but it's a great point to bring up.
The conversation turned into all the city parks, and it was extensive.
A good confirmation for how and whether there's an off-leash dog park here at Tibbetts or not is again, I think, a process to still be determined, but I think it really confirms we have a community that is wanting some designated off-leash dog park areas within its parks.
Do we see any issues with Bernston I assume that we will move forward with this, but let's say, for whatever reason, Tibbetts doesn't work. Is there a way that we can prepare, should that happen, to still move quickly, knowing that the public has asked for something sooner versus than later? We have some of the money set aside instead of another kind of full round of 4 to 5 months saying this was the next best alternate?
No. Put very simply, no. Bernston has a number of other factors attributed to that. As a site, as a site on the creek and with a creek buffer, that precipitates a very different permitting threshold. That property was purchased with grant monies that have a pretty strict conservation easement on it, and so there'd be need for a conversion of that. Conversion with grant funding usually means going out and buying more land. So there's a number of hurdles that Bernston could be an off-leash dog park. It would just be a longer period of time. I think, quite honestly, I mean, from a staff perspective, and this is fine. I mean, as we do this work, and again, considering this a checkpoint tonight, and if we're to focus on this further site process and site investment to consider Tibbetts, if that's an off-leash dog park, if we find something that really confirms or does not allow us to create the quality off-leash dog park that this community is looking for and wanting, then we go back to the drawing board and we explore what would need to be done to make that happen. But unfortunately, Bernston is not a immediate opportunity.
And what's I'm just looking at the Central Park Pad 4. I heard that come up in conversation. That is not an immediate option?
That is not. I know Corey brought it up. Central Park, I know when we did go through this discussion early on and talked about criteria, one of the criteria was identifying properties that are geographically located in a more central place, recognizing there is an off-leash dog park up at Issaquah Highlands already, though that's privately, HOA managed. To put the city one up there, sort of saw that as a low priority. It's certainly something that could be explored. A master plan was adopted 3 years ago.
No, 2. As part of the Central Park Pad 1 project, there was a cry from the community about the loss of a green, grassy, open field, which delayed the Central Park Pad 1 project, and we went out for additional public engagement and came up with some conceptual designs that were vetted with the public to then update the master site plan for Central Park, which is what it's on there now, and calls for a parking area, some picnic shelters, walking paths, more of a community gathering space. So as the Pad 1 2 artificial turf fields were developed, the public really wanted a green, open, grassy, a little more quiet space within Central Park. And so that's what the updated Pad 4 master site plan is now predicting. When you follow the corridor trail under the BPA power lines from Pad 4 to the existing Bark Park up there, it's not very far at all geographically. So when we're looking at trying to provide something for the city as a whole, and more centrally located, providing this use in another location is really preferred. Which is why Central Park was not part of the initial 8 sites that we considered, because of the recent updates and public engagement too.
So just to reiterate, the public 2 years ago in that site development master plan really identified Pad 4 as a space for a broader sense of community use in terms of a grass area than just designating it an off-leash dog park would differ from that.
More comments?
Well, I think that with all the work that the park department has done and all the input from the community, and knowing that we may have some problems up there at Tibbetts Valley Park, we've been talking about it here tonight extensively from the community and from staff, that we really can't make a decision until we move forward as the director and talk about getting more information and find out what we have. And if we get the information and it goes, well, this isn't going to work, then we move on to somewhere else. But I think we can beat this around for quite some time without complete information to make a good decision on whether we want to move forward with construction. So I think we need to get more information, be it from a wetland biologist, from a geologist, whoever we have to talk to find out if that site is the right site. And if not, we move to another one.
And is the right site with the right water drainage and that it's dry,
Yeah,
dry enough and not
we can
muddy?
we can banter this water situation around for months, and we need to get some experts in there and figure it out. Do some test holes, do whatever needs to be done, and get the information. That's where I'm at.
Does that sound like maybe a motion?
I move what I just said. I'll make you say it again.
You get streamline it a little.
I make a motion that we allow the park department staff to move forward to get more information regarding the feasibility for a dog park at Tibbetts Valley Park.
Second.
Any discussion on that? If not, all in favor?
Is Al effectively then, we're approving moving ahead on the project? Is that what we're saying?
Moving ahead only to get more information through a site analysis.
Correct.
Right, which I think is where we were anyways. I don't think that's any different than what we've been saying, right?
Just formalizing it a little bit.
Formalizing.
Got it, just clarifying the formalization.
Any other discussion on that? If not, everyone in favor of the motion presented by Al, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Motion carries, and looks like it's site evaluation time. And you two are going to be busy.
We'll continue with that process, and as I said earlier, we'll certainly keep you and the community engaged with what we've learned and where we go. So,
good.
Thanks for the discussion.
Okay, looks like you don't get a breather, so you're up for goals and policies.
I'm going to take a mild breather, and that I'm going to ask Jennifer Fink to tee this one up. Yeah, goals and policies. We have the opportunity, as we adopted the park plan, to look at reformatting our goals and policies. So we have a game plan we'd like to present to you.
So, as you may recall, one of the steps in the adoption of the Park Strategic Plan was work with the Planning Policy Commission. In the motion that was made from the Planning Policy was to go ahead and adopt this, however, come back within a year with some revision to help simplify the layout of some of the goals and policies, to make it a little easier to find a goal that was related to environment per se. So we have been tasked with, in this next year, to reformat the goals and policies to make them simpler, and we're looking at asking for volunteers from the park board to work with us over the next couple of months on an ad hoc committee. We'll also have one member from the Planning Policy Commission who will work with us as part of this to help as the efforts, because as we go through and come up with our revised policy and formats, we'll want to go back to them as well for their adoption and having them engaged as part of the process. They've shown great interest in the work that the Parks is doing, not only through the Green Necklace, but the Park Strategic Plan, and will help ensure that we're meeting all the goals necessary. So We have, Planning Policy Commission has recommended one volunteer to help sit on our committee already, and we are asking for 2 or 3 Park Board members to work with Shantae and I on the revision of the goals and policies. We're not seeing this as a huge time lift or need. We're hoping to get this work done in the next 2-3 months, maybe meet 2, 3, 4 times at most, and then we'll be coming back to the Park Board from there on with the outcome of our work, talk through what we've achieved, and then be able to take that forward to Planning Policy Commission, and then eventually back to Council again for adoption. So these goals and policies update will go in the next iteration of the comprehensive plan update as well, and will be an insert to our Park Strategic Plan. So with that,
So could you
Volunteer.
clarify, my understanding is that it's not necessarily a rewrite of goals and policies as
Correct.
much as it is kind of a reorganization? of
very
them?
well said. Yes, yes. So we're not trying to come up and create a whole bunch of new policies. We do have a couple items we need to touch on per Planning Policy's request, but outside of those, it is a reorganization exercise. So with
So who would
that,
like to volunteer for this? Chris?
thank you.
I'll stick my right hand up. For this. You remembered.
I did. Anyone else? Would love to have maybe one more?
Happy to help.
Great.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Jonathan.
You will organize the meetings and all
Yes,
that?
yes. So I'll send out kind of a doodle poll as to when a convenient time is to meet. We're going to try and kick off with some initial framework, so we're not starting at square one, and we can go from there.
And you already have a designated person from the policy?
Yes,
commission?
Ron Fall is going to be our
Good.
planning policy.
Good. With the goal to have this done by May?
Yeah, Q1 is kind of our goal, but if it bled in, I'd be happy with the end of April by getting this all done.
Okay,
Sounds great.
good. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. I'll be in touch.
Thanks.
So,
Do I get to talk? No, I already talked.
you already talked. Do you have something more to say about goals and policy?
Dang, it's more than a reorg in my brain. Whew. Okay, now you know where I'm coming from there.
Well, step to the plate and give your 2 cents then, so we better hear it now because...
No, if they're just gonna do a reorg, then you're gonna get a 5-page diatribe, so.
Okay,
I wish I didn't have to.
If I could just clarify based on that comment, just to be transparent. So goals and policies do get revisited and will be revisited when the park strategic plan is updated again. When this was adopted, when the park plan was adopted, both the Planning Policy Commission and the City Council asked as a condition of adoption to look at reformatting and reorganizing the goals and policies in this near term, meaning let's do that this year. And let's understand that then, the Park Strategic Plan's not a forever document. When we then go and update that again, we'll have an opportunity to do a much deeper dive in terms of, do we want to make revisions to that goals and policies? So that is our goal, that's our intent. I'll be honest, be very honest, with those that are listening at home as well. As you look at our work plan that we have for this year in terms of what we are doing, we can certainly handle and do great ad hoc committee work and joint work with the Planning Policy Commission to get and to look at reorganizing the goals and policies. But we would not be at a point right now, staff capacity-wise, to be able to do a full redo of the goals and policies. We would see that happening, though, when we update the Park Strategic Plan. So,
Can I add one item to that? In doing so, if in this reorganization we realize there is nothing that speaks to one specific item and it's really needed to help fill that flow of goals and policies and fill that gap, yes, we will make a recommendation for that. But we're not seeking a whole new rewrite and a whole new revisit. So within this reorganization, if there is something that we identify that needs to be tweaked or added, we will make those recommendations as part of that reformatting. But this is not a new effort that we're going to undertake.
we want to stay true to the intent and desire of both the Planning Policy Commission and the City Council. So thanks for letting me add those comments.
Okay. So that concludes our agenda items. So I guess you have a show for us, Steve?
I do. Would you like to go first?
I can go
Chair?
first to give you a little break here.
That'd be great.
I don't have a whole lot, but one thing we noticed in our calendar for the year is Memorial Day is a conflict for our meeting on the 27th of May. And in our discussion, we came up with the thought of just making our meeting in May on the Tuesday, the 28th of May, which is the day after. Unless there's any objections to that, that's what we'll go ahead and do. I think that's appropriate. But the clerk wanted to get the year in place when there's conflict, so that's kind of why we're addressing this that far ahead of time. And there will be probably, that's kind of a key time of the year to meet, rather than to just not have a meeting. So it'll be Tuesday the 28th. The only other thing I have, I kind of wanted to give a little bit of an update again on coexisting with carnivores, because that's still a program that's moving forward. I've talked about it a couple times. I've been fortunate enough to be selected on one of the camera trapping teams, and so our training starts next month, a couple Saturdays, and then we set up the cameras in March and monitor cameras through November of this year. Cameras will be set up on Tiger Mountain, on Cougar Mountain, and the Highlands. So those three areas. Don't know anything more specifics until I have my training, but be on the lookout for lots of cool images here throughout the year of all of our wildlife. If you are still interested at all to get more information about this program, there are 2 community meetings occurring this week. One on Thursday, the 31st at 7 p.m. in the Eagles Room, and another one on Saturday, February 2nd at 1 o'clock at Blakely Hall. Really, I've attended all of these, and really they're just kind of finally getting down to the nitty-gritty here at this point in terms of what the real 3 key elements are to present to the community about an education of coexisting with carnivores. So if you're interested, those are the next 2 meetings. I don't know how many more meetings there'll be beyond that. And that's all I have. So that wasn't much of a breather.
All right. No, that was great. Thank you. So in terms of Parks Director's report, I have a PowerPoint I want to share with you. We had sought to transition to quarterly, having a chance to sort of give a quarterly overview of what's been going on elsewhere within the department. We missed the past couple. I think was a relatively busy work plan towards the tail end of last year. So what this will represent is really some highlights from the latter part of the year, and also some highlights throughout 2018. The focus of the director's report is really going to be looking at our operational and programming side of the shop, what we do both in operations and programming that maybe doesn't necessarily come up as topics here for our park board meetings, but I think as you'll see, this really is just further confirmation of a really incredible staff that we have within the Parks and Recreation Department. So I don't have a cursor. Thank you. Thank you. We'll give like a, okay. I probably won't go pistols, but.
You know what I mean.
Yes, I do. So a couple of highlights within park operations. Last year represented our 25th year as a Tree City USA. In April of last year, we put together a significant-sized Arbor Day, Earth Day event to celebrate that. We did this at Sammamish Cove Park. We had partners, obviously, there, both from the state park, Mountains of Sound Greenway Trust, Friends of Lake Sammamish State Park. Just was a terrific event. Both Mayor Pauley was out there, as well as the State Commissioner of Public Lands, Hillary Franz, attended the event. I think just a great representation, great work by the park operations team to pull together those partners and really make a size and scale event that's, I think, befitting our focus on trees in this community. As note, in 2018, a little more than 3,100 trees were planted throughout our city open space. Volunteers contributed about $43,000 if you reflect their hours worked in a wage to help address some of our invasive plants and other work within waterways and our open spaces. So lots of work that occurs. A new element, a new partnership that we initiated in 2018 on a little bigger scale is worked with the Washington Conservation Corps. This is WCC. They're part of the State Department of Ecology. The city has used WCC crews in a variety of events. We contracted with them and really, I think in many ways, multiplied our efforts in some of our open space restoration and removal of invasives in a really significant way last year. We're replicating this in 2019. The areas we focused on, Matt Meckler, our park ops supervisor, oversaw this contract. Last year we focused on some areas on Tibbetts Valley Park, sort of opposite from the off-leash dog area site that we're considering. This was along Tibbetts Creek itself through that park. A lot of invasive removals as well at Inge Johnson and Squaw Valley Park and Park Point were the primary parks that we're focused on. Park ops as well, in terms of being stewards of our parks and open space, also do a lot of support when it comes to special events. Some of the big ones are really a big lift by our parks team, namely Salmon Days is certainly the big one we're all aware of. That is a huge lift and support that's done by park ops staff. They do some seasonal support. Obviously, the hanging of the wreaths along Front Street is a big tradition in our community. That's Corey giving you the thumbs up there. Next slide. Transitioning over to some of our programming work. Senior Center has obviously been a big focus of the city and the Parks and Rec Department these last couple of years. Just some highlights you maybe were not aware of. Even as we were looking and doing interim operation through last year, we were able to be very successful in receiving grants, both on a smaller scale. Catholic Community Services is our partner that we do lunches 2 days a week with. They provided $1,700 to allow us to do a little bit more in terms of volunteer appreciation and some additional equipment. We had a more sizable grant received through the King County Veterans and Seniors Levy, one-time funding of $97,000. This allowed us to switch out all of the windows. If you'd been to the senior center the last number of years, you've noticed those windows were very tired, both just broken seals. Functionally, we were getting a lot of heat loss and condensation, so all the windows were replaced, able to enhance some of our meal work, upgrade some IT equipment, and just do some one-time capital investments that have really helped that facility in a huge way. On the programming side of the senior center, Courtney Garcia and her team have just done an amazing job of furthering the program offerings, getting really creative in how we offer programs. Both programs we offer ourselves, as well through community partnerships. A number of those partnerships enhanced, and really one key measure we see for the success of the senior center is when we have our other nonprofit partners excited and involved and engaged in the facility. We really see that as a type of culture and a vibrancy that we want to see at the senior center. We saw an increase in volunteer support. We saw certainly the expansion to lunches 5 days a week have been a big hit as well as our trips. Some special events that the senior center put on, everything very creative, everything from a fashion show, the annual celebration of Veterans Day, has always been it's certainly been a tradition. Dave Wagner and some of our other Issaquah veterans just do a great job of helping and putting that on. Mayor Pauley was a frequent visitor, offering herself for a Q&A. This last fall, some Seahawk legends came and had an event at the senior center in December. Extremely well attended lunch, a lot of fun, lots of autographs, just a great time that the seniors enjoyed. Also, it's been great to bring in musicians, music performers of a variety of kind at the senior center. Our rental teams who oversee Pickering Barn and Tibbetts Manor, as well as our farmers market, which will be on another slide, hosted a large number of events through the year. 273 at the barn, 166 at the manor. Many of you have been involved in a wedding of any kind, which many we have. These are not just simple events. These are very, very important milestone events for renters, and our staff does a great job of catering to those groups' needs. They've had some real success in getting creative and how to market those potentials or those rental sites with some creative online services, and have had some success in that front. I mentioned farmers markets before. Issaquah celebrated its 28th year of the farmers market, and I think in just the tradition, in its location, right next to the Pickering Barn, it is I think it's an event that this community should be immensely proud of. I know staff has done a great job of managing that. 22 Saturdays, May through September. We had over 100 vendors at the market, 25 of those new, so just a great sense of healthy turnover with vendor options. Total sales were just over 1.1 million. That represented a record, highest volume of sales for the total market. Staff does just a really creative job of adding some variety to market days in terms of events and performances, kids getting involved, and I think just another great highlight for the market, and really what speaks to this community is that with all of that success and all that success of community and all the sales, still over 16,000 pounds of produce were donated to the Issaquah Food Bank as part of the market. Some things that we do on the sort of sports and athletics side that you may or may not be aware of. Running is a really big thing on the east side, and we have a gliders cross-country program and a track and field program that has continued to see growth and success, both in our spring and summer programs, as well as our fall cross-country program. Continue to see increased growth, and I know staff looks forward to, and I think rightfully so, sees continued growth in those programs. The picture on the right is Tibbetts Valley Park in what was known as Friday Night Lights, where a cross-country type meet was held on a Friday night under the lights, and all involved had a great time. Our more traditional youth sports continue to see large numbers. Our youth basketball league, which is right in the middle of it, hot and heavy, of over 2,000 participants in grades K through 12. We utilize 21 schools throughout Issaquah and up into the plateau. That's via our interlocal agreement with Issaquah School District. Our Spring Youth Soccer League this last spring, and certainly as we head into 2019, we'll be gearing up soon. Just over 750 participants in that program as well. We partner directly with Issaquah Soccer Club on that program. Very successful partnership. Youth Advisory Board, another just great tradition. Picture on the left is Kathy and Lisa, who really are the anchor staff for this program. 40 youth are on the board this year. They do just a terrific job of expanding and really growing the events that we're able to offer, and that the youth board has a real direct leadership role in putting on a number of events, from nights that focus on our middle schoolers to the kids triathlon that we do every year, a Harry Potter night that just occurred a couple weeks ago at the community center. Just a great mix of events. Youth Advisory Board members, just real quick, it's okay to go forward. They're actually going to be presenting February 4th at the next City Council meeting, giving a chance to share and highlight the work that they've done to council and community. Summer day camps, another great summer. Over 1,200 campers throughout our summer day camp programs. That is not an easy effort, and one that is done with great leadership by our full-time staff, and done with great care and training of our part-time staff. We rely very much on high school and college age staff to be key to, I think, the quality and the success of that program. I think we certainly measure the fact that registration for summer day camp typically fills in a day or two as a testament to the success of that program for certain. Summer concerts were another big hit in 2018. We estimate over 12,000 concert goers came to our 8 Tuesday night concerts. We saw some large crowds. Picture on the left certainly represents that. In fact, aside from one of the Tuesday nights that we had, it was one of the smoke. It was a night of quite a bit of smoke from fires that kept attendance down to maybe 800. Other than that, we had well over 1,000 people each and every night at our concerts, and could not be done without our partnership with Kiwanis and the Art Commission as well. So great work there. I mentioned our hiring of teens. Though not a formal program, it's something we are very, very intentional about, and I think show great care in. And when you really think about when we offer programs, they don't happen without our part-time staff. And such a large amount of our part-time staff are teens, 122 teens in 2018. We do think of this as a program, if you will, and that many of these teens, this is their first job. They're likely going to go pro in something else someday, right? But as a first-time job, they're really learning leadership skills in many, many different ways, and one that we're quite proud of, and I know as a testament, even hearing from staff that have been employees of this department years ago, that come back and are professional in something else, but we'll never forget that summer as a day camp staffer and what they learned doing that. Certainly more than flipping burgers. Some highlights of our park facilities team. Facilities, they certainly had a busy 2018. You're aware of some of the restructuring that I talked about through 2018. This meant some work that the team did, in particular to the 235 building, which is the building just adjacent to my office, just in front of the community center. We really felt important to transition all of our recreation staff into the community center building to really, I think, maximize teaming and programming. So they all went into there. We created a new community meeting space. Facilities did in the far end, the Bush Street side of the 235 building. And yeah, next slide. The community center itself, you're certainly aware of the new flooring that was completed in the gymnasium. It has been a big hit. Facilities was very instrumental in doing some structural work that allowed for the Rainier Room, which is the room up on the second floor of the community center, to get new hardwood floors and really become a bigger space, and a space that gives a lot of flexibility for programming, along with the after-school programming that it does, also allowing for fitness classes, dance classes, and really just, I think, a whole new array of use for that facility. Again, with the gym floor that has been mentioned before, the new flooring that is up on the second floor around the track area, just some of the cleaning and rough cleaning that was done in the locker rooms and new tile restoration has really, I think, breathed some new life into a very well-used, well-loved community center. Great work by the facilities team. Also, our other major recreation facility, the pool, facility staff led this past summer re-roofing. That re-roofing included new plywood decking and roof for the pool. I mentioned earlier, under the Senior Center grant, facilities oversaw the replacement of the windows, which has been a great, I think, aesthetic hit for the Senior Center, but also energy efficiency wise. And then one last item to highlight that I think we mentioned throughout the year, but it became official in the fall of last year. The garage opened up. This was via a partnership that we endeavored and worked on with the nonprofit group, formerly known as Team Cafe. They now occupy about 2/3 of the 235 building. If you haven't been by and taken a look at that space, it's fantastic. They really focus on high school students that might find themselves in the gaps, if you will, and looking for another place to connect. And the garage team and staff, Kaylee, Jake, and their team are working really closely with our recreation staff, and we just see I think a great opportunity to further maximize our efforts in terms of how we are serving and supporting teens in and through Issaquah. So that's a highlight of some of our other operational and programmatic work that's been going on in the department. And we a snapshot, but again, hopefully one that reflects, like I said earlier, a passionate, committed, amazing team of employees that really care about what they do in this community.
Thank you for that. Nice to see
Yeah.
the images and all the work. And this is now going to be a quarterly thing?
Yes, yeah, the goal would be to provide some quarterly updates on, again, some of the additional work that might not be specific items here with the park board, but continuing to give you that big picture of what's going on in the department. One item looking ahead, later this week, I wanted to mention to you on the 31st, which is Thursday, January 31st, I'll be taking part in a panel discussion. The Issaquah Trails Club is doing their annual meeting. They've done it the last 2 years. This will be the third year. I've really enjoyed being part of a roundtable discussion where they'll have myself as a representative from the city of Issaquah, representative from King County Parks, a representative from state DNR and state parks, there to really just talk about the Alps themselves, the collaborative work that is going on and is really planned for within stewarding all of the open spaces that those public agencies manage. So this is the 40th year of the Issaquah Trails Club, so that's going to be, I'm not going to get the time right. I think it starts, I was going to say 7.
It starts at 7, 6:30 for the little gathering.
6:30 for social, 7 o'clock. Mayor Polly will be the keynote as well. It'll be at Pickering Barn this year, so if you're able to make it, it's a great turnout.
Yeah, they've really done a lot of momentum here with a lot of changes and getting some new people on the board, and so it should be fun to actually see that. Anything else? New business discussion?
I noticed in the last couple of windstorms we had that the Hope property in Ingy Johnson Park had a bunch of trees falling down. Is there any plans on how to deal with that, or what you're going to do with that, or is it going to be?
Those two properties specifically, or?
Well, those two specifically, I see a lot of trees laying down. I'm just thinking if there's people using the parks and we've got some trees in partial down conditions that are falling down.
Yeah, absolutely. The park, so after that windstorm.
Keep an eye on them, you know.
Yeah, yes, yeah, no, the park operations staff went out and did a full assessment of our parks and properties. The parks that certainly have use, those trees were taken care of. Some of our open space areas that do not necessarily have a direct public use were a second priority, but I know they'll be going out and either cleaning them up or keeping them as snags if they provide habitat. But we would certainly and will be addressing any partial falls that are a hazard of sorts, a potential safety hazard. They'll be
That's what I was
addressing
thinking.
those.
If there's partials out there, then maybe somebody should put a sign up saying, or something. There's kind of a liability there. We've got trees that are hanging.
So speaking of that, I mean, since we no longer have an in-house arborist, well, I guess kind of we do, but indirectly, does the city bring in a consultant annually to actually look at all the parks to weed out what might be a potential hazard with trees?
Yeah, we have a on-contract, on-call arborist that we rely on quite heavily throughout the year, whether it's identifying a hazard tree, addressing a hazard tree, diagnosing a hazard tree. So, yes, absolutely. I think another item that's relevant to this within our work plan in 2019, you may recall last fall mentioning formalizing an urban forest management program. We'll be kicking off this year, and really one of the first steps of that is we'll be partnering with an agency called Forterra. They're another nonprofit agency here in King County doing a tree assessment, urban forest analysis assessment of all of our open space area, and really identifying areas of poor health within our urban forest, and helping to, I think, further bolster our ability to manage and steward a little more proactively some of those unhealthy conditions within our forest. So, more to come.
Jeremy?
You showed the red barn up there and all the activities there. Does it still not have air conditioning in the red barn portion?
There is no HVAC within that. Correct.
Have we considered maybe putting some HVAC in there when there's so many weddings and, you know, reinvesting some of this, all this money we're getting for all those activities to put back in the barn?
We have, as part of the facilities capital plan, we're looking at HVAC investment. Yep.
I was there for a wedding a year and a half ago. We had to have been 150 degrees in there. It was terrible. Wish I had AC at the time. I just remembered it when you saw it.
We are, yes, so HVAC is one of the systems, a little more expensive. Another investment we'll be making this year with the barn, given its goal to be an enterprise revenue generating facility, is on the dairy barn side. If you're familiar with the Pickering barn, we're going to be doing some acoustic treatments. It's long been just some sound acoustic issues on that side of the barn, so that'll be happening this year. But then, yeah, looking at future years for heating and cooling for both sides, both the hay barn and the dairy barn.
And you have a 2019 work plan document that we'll see at some point?
Sure. Yeah. Happy to share with you. Yeah.
Be nice to see what's going to be happening.
Yep. Yep.
Anything else? If not, we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.